Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this meeting of Mid Suffolk District Council Cabinet. I'm Councillor Susie Morley, leader of Mid Suffolk District Council. May I remind you of some domestic arrangements? Please ensure that microphones are turned off when not in use. Please do not interrupt other speakers. If you're attending the meeting to speak and persistently interrupt the meeting, you may be asked to leave. Please remember to use the chat function only to indicate that you wish to speak and not to post comments or questions. Please note that messages in the chat panel can be viewed by people watching the live broadcast. I would like to remind everyone present that this meeting will be broadcast live to the internet and will be capable of repeated viewing. The whole of the meeting will be filmed, except where there are confidential or exempt items. If you make a representation to the meeting, you will be deemed by the Council to have consented to being filmed. By entering this meeting as a speaker, you are also consenting to being recorded by the Council and to the possible use of those images and sound recordings for webcasting and/or training purposes. The Council, members of the public and the press may record, film, photograph or broadcast this meeting when the public and the press are not lawfully excluded. I will now ask the Governance Officer to carry out the introductions.
Thank you, Chair. In addition to the Cabinet members, we have Councillor Field and Councillor Wellham in attendance today. And we also have the Chief Executive, the Strategic Director and the Monitoring Officer in attendance. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So can I move to the agenda, please? Item 1 is apologies for absence.
We have no apologies today, Chair.
Thank you. Item 2, to receive declarations of pecuniary and non-pecuniary interest by members. Are there any to declare?
I believe that will be a no, Chair.
Thank you very much. Item 3, MCA/20/17, is the confirmation of the minutes of the meeting of the Mid Suffolk Cabinet meeting held on the 7th of November 2020. Are there any points regarding the accuracy of the minutes? No? Okay, could I have a proposer, please?
Councillor Flatman, Chair. Happy to propose the minutes for you.
Thank you, Councillor Flatman. And a seconder, please.
Yes, this is Councillor Jessica Fleming. I'm happy to second the minutes.
Thank you very much, Councillor Fleming. The Governance Officer will now conduct the electronic vote.
Thank you, Chair. Councillors, could you please open the vote in the Modern Gov app by clicking the plus sign on the top right of the agenda and selecting attendance and voting. In the voting tab, the vote for this item will show in blue. That should appear now. Thank you, Chair. That's 9 votes for, which is unanimous.
Lovely, thank you very much. So item 4, to receive notifications of petitions in accordance with the Council's petition scheme.
None received, Chair.
And item 5, questions by councillors.
None received, Chair.
Thank you. Item 6, matters referred by the Overview and Scrutiny or the Joint Audit and Standards Committees.
There were none, Chair.
Thank you. Item 7 is the forthcoming decisions list. Does anybody have any comments on that? No? Thank you. Item 8 is MCA/20/18, and is the inter-authority agreement between Baber District Council and Mid-Suffolk District Council. As councillors were aware, we entered into an inter-authority agreement, which was effectively a memorandum of understanding between Baber and Mid-Suffolk District Councils when we first started working together in 2012. This agreement enabled us to ensure that all staff are able to work for both councils and integrate services. Much has changed over the last 9 years, and so it is necessary to refresh the agreement to ensure it remains fit for purpose. The revised agreement has been developed between our 3 statutory officers, the Chief Executive, the Monitoring Officer, and the Section 151 Officer. I will therefore move the recommendations in this report and ask for a seconder, and then I will ask the Chief Executive to summarise the changes made to this new agreement and to answer any questions. Could I have a seconder, please?
Madam Chair, I'm very happy to second this inter-authority agreement. In doing so, I fully support the paper, and especially the fact that there will be an annual review of the content, which will ensure it is always kept up to date.
Thank you very much, Councillor Brewster. Do I have any questions from Cabinet members?
Chairman, would you like me just to quickly summarise a couple of the changes?
Sorry, Chief Exec, thank you very much. Yes.
No problem. For Councillor's benefit, I'm referring to paragraph 4.3 in particular, and apologies should be given from the monitoring officer who would normally be presenting this report, but she's chairing our tactical management team meeting at the moment in relation to COVID-19. So you can see there in relation to 4.3, paragraph 4.3, this is largely a technical and a governance report. It's simply bringing up to date the agreement that was put in place back in 2012. And so I'll just quickly run you through those bullet points and then take any questions if there are any. As you'll know, we've adopted the cabinet model of governance since 2012. And so there's a reflection there of replacing the joint member integration board, which is in place at the time, and replacing that with a cabinet. There's also been a series of legislative changes since then, so things like GDPR and the data protection provisions, and they've all been updated within the report. The preamble itself for the agreement has been updated. As you can imagine, what was described as the position in relation to the 2 councils back in 2011, 2012 has completely changed as we find ourselves now in 2021. And so that's just been updated to reflect the current time. The obvious one that would need to happen is that the first agreement will terminate, subject to agreeing to enter into this second agreement. And obviously both yourselves and Baber need to agree to do so. As Councillor Brewster just referenced, there is now an annual review to make sure that it remains up to date. So we're not going to just review it every 9 years, but we will do so on an annual basis just to pick up any changes that may be necessary. The document has also been strengthened. The agreement's been strengthened in a couple of places. So the first of these is in relation to the cost sharing arrangements. So under the old agreement, those cost sharing arrangements between the 2 councils was simply a matter for officers to decide. So it was a conversation between the council's Section 151 officer and one of the directors. That's been updated now to make sure that it also includes the cabinet members for finance and the leaders. And similarly, the other change, slight strengthening, I suppose, is that the replacement of the integration of staff transitional arrangements. Clearly, 9 years on, all of our staff are working for both authorities. And so you'll see there it's been included the actual details of the Section 113 agreement, which is the legal provision that enables both officers or an officer from one council to work for the other and vice versa. The last 3 things there is insertion of the arrangements so that you can hold things like simultaneous cabinet meetings. That's just to reflect the reality that you have done that on occasions. The removal of the transition costs and premises clauses, because clearly we're 9 years on and we now share a building, if we manage to ever get back to it, hopefully, but we now share a building rather than having separate buildings. And then lastly, just the insertion of some clauses in relation to inquiries, hearings and proceedings and investigations. So very much a technical and a governance report, but important that it was brought up to date for the benefit of both authorities. So I'll stop there, Chairman, hand back to you, and if there's any questions.
Thank you. Does anybody have any questions? Anybody who's not a cabinet member have any questions? Oh, Councillor Whitehead.
Thank you. I see the BEIB are meeting on the 7th of January. So does this come into effect immediately they vote, or what date? Because there isn't anything written in the agreement. It just says this starts on a blank date, doesn't it?
Yes, so once both authorities have agreed to it, so from the 7th, not wishing to preempt your decision or BEIB's cabinet decision, but assuming you both make that decision, then we'll insert the relevant dates and get those signed. So I suspect it would be in effect from the end of this week.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm now going to open up the item for debate. And again, if you can use the hands up function. Does anybody want to discuss this? Councillor Richardson.
Thank you, Chair. I'll just be very brief. I just wanted to sort of echo what Councillor Brewster's already said, that I think this is a welcome opportunity to refresh the agreement. Obviously, a lot has happened in the last 9 years. We've adopted the new cabinet model. And I think it's also quite important that we do have that annual review mechanism within the agreement going forward, because obviously, as I say, a lot's changed over the last 9 years. But we've also, for many councillors who were elected in 2015 or 2019, this would be the first opportunity they've had to scrutinise that. So I think that's a welcome inclusion. But as the Chief Executive was alluding to, I think it's quite sensible that what we have now in the agreement is a reflection of what we have been doing already, such as the formal now provision for our simultaneous cabinet meetings, which will hopefully mean that we've got more aligned decision making around areas where we've got shared interests. So I definitely welcome this, and as the Chief Exec says, it is a technical and governance piece of work, but obviously it is very important to the work that we do. So I think this is absolutely right that we brought this forward, and we'll continue to review it every year thereafter. Thank you, Chair.
Lovely. Thank you, Councillor Richardson. So I will now ask the Governance Officer to conduct the electronic vote.
Thank you, Chair. Members, once again, if you go into the app, this vote should now appear in progress in blue for you to cast your votes. Just waiting for one. Oh, there we go. That's 9 votes for, Chair, which is unanimous.
Lovely. Thank you very much indeed. Item 9 is MCA/20/21 and is fees and charges for 2021/22. And I'm going to invite the Cabinet Member for Finance to introduce the report.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I'm pleased to introduce the first of my 3 reports this afternoon, which is report MCA 2021, which covers fees and charges for the year 2021-22, and which starts on page 59 of our Cabinet papers. In previous years, the fees and charges schedule for the coming year has simply been included as just one appendix of several attached to our General Fund budget report, but we've taken the decision this year to give it more prominence and its own report. The Council raises income of approximately £4.5 million from fees and charges. To put that into some sort of context, this sum is about 70% of the total we precept for our share of the council tax, and the sum raised will cover 14% of our gross expenditure. So we're certainly not talking sundry income. The fees and charges schedule is set out in Appendix A. I'd encourage all members to review this document. In fact, I'd go further and encourage all residents to review it, because I believe all will be really surprised by just how many services our council can and does provide. As well as services for individual residents, we inspect and license a vast array of businesses so that our residents can use them all with confidence. My first thoughts when looking through this long list were just how many fees and charges remain unchanged year on year. The changes we are proposing to our fees and charges are set out in paragraphs 6.8 and 6.9. The changes are relatively modest, with the bulk being at 3%. The recommendation I'd like to propose is set out in paragraph 3.1. This is asking Cabinet to approve the fees and charges set out in Appendix A of the report. These fees and charges have been incorporated into the General Fund budget for 21-22, which we'll be reviewing later in this meeting. And having proposed the recommendation, Madam Chairman, could you please ask for a seconder? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Whitehead. Do I have a seconder?
Yes, there's Councillor Hadding. I'm happy to second this report, and I'd like to thank the Finance Cabinet member for his introduction. Fees and charges are an important source of income to the Council, enabling important services to be sustained and provided. In order to sustain the delivery of services in the future, this revenue is essential. So I'm happy to second the recommendations as set out in the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Headingham. So any Cabinet members have any questions? Can use the hands up function, please. Any non-Cabinet members have any questions?
Yes.
I'll now open up the item for debate. Again, if you can use the Councillor Field, do you have a question?
I do, yeah. Sorry, I was a bit slow reacting.
That's all right.
Just a couple of points, really. I note that, well...
No, Councillor Field, these are questions for clarification only,
yes,
not for discussion.
Yeah, it was really an issue of the increases of 3%. I noticed that a number of those are in areas where suppliers, shops and whatever, zoos I see on the list are quite challenged at the moment, and was just going to ask, do you feel this is reasonable to increase charges in the current circumstances?
Councillor Whitehead?
Happy to answer that. I do think the charges or the increases are very modest. I mean, I take your point, but I don't think some of these increases, which £2 or £3 here and there, would be the sort of the thing that broke the camel's back, so to speak. But I take your point as being a valid point, but I think 3% still is modest increases.
Okay, thank you. Could I have one more question? I'll resist the temptation to debate it.
I want a question starts with who, when, where, what, why, or how. Thank you.
I wonder if I can do that. Page 62, legal implications. It talks about a recovery on a, well, the sentence I'm looking at, a paragraph, clause I'm looking at, says the latter on a cost recovery basis. So that's discretionary services, and did wonder whether some of the things we're talking about there, that cost recovery basis criteria is being met. I wonder if I can be assured of that, i.e. that we're not making a profit on some of the services which we're allowed to do, that where we're not allowed to make such a profit.
I mean, I guess until you get to the end of the year and sort of look at what the income is and what the costs are, you can never sort of put hand on heart and say that. But if either Catherine or Melissa want to just come in at this point and give any other assurances, I'd be happy to hear from them.
Thank you, Councillor Whitehead. Yeah, I can probably just add to that and say, as part of the budget setting process, I know that the finance team do talk to the individual corporate managers to look at what their costs are and the income. So there's sort of an annual review of that. But as Councillor Whitehead said, it's when you get to the end of the year and you've got your actuals that you can see whether you did recover all your costs or not.
Thank you. So I'm now going to open up the item for debate. Again, if you could use the hands up function if you wish to say anything. No? Okay, so I'll now ask the Governance Officer to conduct the electronic vote.
Thank you, Chair. Members, once again, the vote is now in progress on your ModGov app. Thank you, Chair. That's 9 votes for. That's unanimous.
Lovely. Thank you very much indeed. Item 10 is MCA/20/22 and is the transfer of the vehicles of the Council's vehicle fleet to hydro-treated vegetable oil. This item is for voting only, for noting only. I will now ask the Cabinet Member for the Environment to introduce the report.
Yes, thank you. This is Councillor Jessica Fleming, and I'm very pleased to be introducing this report and this proposed action, because there are enormous benefits to the environment and to both Baber and Suffolk residents by switching to hydro-treated vegetable oil. As I think the Cabinet report says, we have looked at alternatives to to reducing emissions from the waste fleet. The waste fleet being the largest emitter, along with leisure centres. So these two sources are where we've concentrated our efforts first to so-called grab the low-hanging fruits. If we can switch to the hydro-treated vegetable oil, we stand to save at least 900 tonnes of carbon a year between the districts, and this is something we need to do along with Baber. It has to be a combined effort because the fleets are shared. It would be impractical to do it separately as a district council. Also, there are some important pollution prevention savings in terms of the tailpipe emissions from burning hydro-treated vegetable oil as compared to diesel. There are significant reductions in all other pollutants, in particular some fairly nasty pollutants called aromatic hydrocarbons, which are persistent and toxic and are associated with the combustion of diesel. The hydro-treated vegetable oil also burns much cleaner. It emits less carbon pollution, less particulates, and will result in cleaner air for all the areas that the vehicles collect in. It runs well under all circumstances, better under cold conditions, and is generally better for engines because of the cleaner nature of the fuel. People may have some questions about, where is all the sort of used fat coming from that will make up this material, because we are concentrating on sourcing from waste vegetable oil as opposed to vegetable oil that's grown from a biofuel crop. And I think that's very important to note, because I think there are some life cycle issues with biofuel crops, some concerns about that, but this is based on treating used vegetable oil. At the moment, the source we're looking at comes from Finland. That's not to say that it will be coming from overseas indefinitely, because we're looking at the British market as well. At the moment, the cost is slightly higher than diesel. We expect the cost to be adjustable. Both of the costs will adjust over time. So I think this is something that is very important for us to do. If, for instance, if we weren't to take this opportunity, the costs to the councils of meeting our carbon reduction obligations would no doubt be a lot higher, because this is one of the two low-hanging fruit. And as I say, I do hope everyone can support it. I just also wanted today to share a little bit of news about a train journey that took place on the 22nd of December. And this was a test run by a Class 66 locomotive, starting from British Steel's plant in Scunthorpe and ending in Southampton. This locomotive was fueled, took the first run with 100% pure, renewable hydro-treated vegetable oil. The experiment was extremely successful. It was organised by DP Cargo UK and Network Rail, and I think that this just shows how well this and how flexible this oil is in a wide variety of engines. So I was really pleased to hear this. I think it's the start of something really important, and I do hope you can all support the paper. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Fleming. Do we have a seconder?
Yes. Sorry, just that was the delay. Councillor Byrne, I'm more than pleased to second this this proposal, or this this move to HVO. It's obviously a great step to make in our carbon reduction aspirations, and a very significant one too. The only thing that surprises me is that there has not been, according to the report, an independent assessment of the CO2 output for this particular fuel, which surprises me. But if we are reassured that we're going to make at least a 90% saving on CO2, that's whole life CO2, as it were, from planting the crop that supplies the oils, even though it burns to produce CO2, a renewable source rather than a fossil source is obviously the way to go. And I'm very pleased we've taken this initiative and taken it so soon as well. It ought to be an example to other local authorities to do the same. I hope we can benefit from that. The fact that it produces a good deal less in the way of noxious elements and noxious substances that come out of the exhaust as well, nitrogen dioxide, sulfur dioxide, etc. That is obviously a bonus beyond our carbon saving. Not least a bonus for the operatives who collect the bins and put them into the vehicles. It must be a much healthier environment for them to operate in. So it's a plus point all round as far as I'm concerned. Very happy to second it.
Thank you very much, Councillor Byrne. This item is only for noting. So do we have any questions of clarification on this? Councillor Field?
Yes, there's something to be supported, as you say, but a note around paragraph 411, there's some comments about the issues of palm oil, and it says oil of choice for HVO is typically palm oil, and clearly there's a volume issue. There's got a lot of diesel used in the world, and replacing it all with HVO sounds difficult. So I wonder if Councillor Fleming might sort of expand on that area a bit and just explain why we shouldn't be concerned about the palm oil implications.
We are specifying non-palm oil content fuel. I personally would not be supportive of any program that promotes palm oil, and I think probably most of us feel that way. I am actually myself amazed that so much, chips and McDonald's and etc. genuinely does produce so much potential feedstock for this new fuel. However, at the moment, the supply seems to be steady. My guess is that if it were scaled up to be an actual replacement for red diesel, that there would be some supply problems. But we're not at that stage at the moment at all, and it's being widely taken up by those who are forward thinking, and I'm anxious for us to grab the opportunity. I did just want to mention, I did go on our emission factor database a few days ago, and as far as I could tell, there is an emission factor specific to hydrotreated vegetable oil. It may not be fully released now, but it is definitely being developed, and it does have a different set of emissions to all of the other types of biodiesel, etc., slightly different. They all have slightly different emission factors. So I think if the emission factor isn't already published for use, it will be very shortly. This is in relation to Councillor Byrne's question. So yeah, I think at the moment we haven't met a supply barrier. That remains to be seen, John. A good question. Thank you.
Thank you for that. As I said, I think we're in support, but just there are some concerns in that area.
I thoroughly, I think I'm completely in agreement with you on that. Thank you.
And also the prerequisite that no palm oil is used will be built into our procurement spec as well. Anybody else have any questions? Okay, so we don't need to vote on this. This is for noting only. Thank you, Councillor Fleming, for updating the Cabinet on this really, really important milestone that we're leading the way on. So thank you very much for bringing this to Cabinet.
Well, very pleased to. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Fleming. Item 11 is MCA/20/19 and is the draft general fund budget for 2021 to 22 and also the 4-year outlook. And I'm now going to invite the Cabinet Member for Finance to introduce this report.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. My second report this afternoon is the draft general fund budget 21-22 and 4-year outlook, which starts at page 123 of our pack. When I stood up to present the budget for 2021 back in Endeavour House in February 2020, I little imagined that our whole world would soon be changing so drastically by the pandemic. The Section 151 officer, the finance team, together with myself and opposite number at Bay by Councillor Ward, have collectively spent a great deal of time during 2020 establishing the effects of the pandemic on the Council's finances. Our initial projections were horrendous, but as I advised Cabinet when reporting our Q2 outturn forecast, central government has been extremely generous with their assistance to local councils, helping us minimise the impact of the pandemic on our finances. And some of that generosity will extend through to the end of the first quarter of 21-22. There are lots of details within this budget report setting out the financial impact of COVID-19 and the present economic environment in which the country finds itself now. You can see paragraphs 4.5 through to 418 for lots of details there. Now, like ourselves, the government has remained focused on responding to the public health and economic emergency, as well as them being engaged in the protracted Brexit negotiations and contingency planning. And they've therefore had limited time to raise their sights to the future. And accordingly, they've just announced a 1-year spending review and put in place only a short-term fix in respect of new homes bonus. They will soon be starting a consultation on a future replacement for new homes bonus, but they've delayed the fair funding review, the business rates review, and a business rates reset. And all this makes it very difficult to make any meaningful forecast beyond March 2022 for our 4-year outlook. In addition, the provisional financial settlement was only announced on the 17th of December. That's the last possible date before the Christmas parliamentary recess and just 5 working days before our Christmas break and the deadline for the preparation of this report. Details of this provisional settlement are included in paragraphs 419 to 421, but some of the changes have still to be fed through into our budget numbers. So Cabinet should therefore take great heed of the first word of this report's heading, the word draft. There remains further work to be done before bringing a finalised report back to Cabinet in February for endorsement to full Council. The Cross-Party Overview and Scrutiny Committee will likewise have their opportunity, as usual, to examine our plans in detail and make their valued observations. The budget we approved in February 20 for the present year 2021 incorporated an increase in the Mid-Suffolk share of council tax by 1.66% in that year, and this increase was assumed to continue year on year throughout the 4-year outlook. This draft budget continues with that assumption. These are modest annual increases, which, along with a small growth every year as new built homes become occupied, mean that we'll be gradually building up an ever more robust council tax base to serve us for the future. Current projections show us raising 6.382 million from council tax in 2021-22, increasing to 6.987 million by 2024-25. This draft budget does produce healthy surpluses throughout the 4-year period. This year, we are again adding 1 million to the Commercial Development Risk Management Reserve, whilst we are still awaiting planning permission on the revised master plan for our major Gateway 14 development before groundworks can even begin. We've also added a further £500,000 to our Climate Change and Biodiversity Reserve to provide a serious amount of firepower to these vital causes. I believe we also need to seriously consider further additions to reserves to cover future planning, legal and planning enforcement expenditure, which we need to decide between now and going to full council. We anticipate getting SIFCO fully invested by the end of March 2021, and therefore no further capital investment for yield has been incorporated into our future capital programme. The details of our future capital programme from April 21 to March 25 are set out in Appendix A. So, Madam Chairman, fellow Cabinet members, and indeed all members present, I welcome your comments, observations and questions on this draft fund budget report. Despite my caveats that there will be changes to be made to this draft before it returns here in February, our expenditure is pretty much now finalised, and likewise best estimations of our anticipated income streams for the coming year. I'm happy to propose the 2 recommendations set out in paragraph 3 for Cabinet's considerations and would ask for a seconder. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Whitehead. Do we have a seconder, please?
Yes, please, Madam Chairman. It's Councillor Gould here. I'd very much like to second the report. As Councillor Whitehead says, in setting the current year budget, we had no notion of what was to come. The approach, which built on the administration's strong record of financial planning and management, strengthened our resilience against possible risk while making new provision for key policies such as carbon reduction. The specific risks we planned for, though, did not include a global pandemic. Our initial assessment of the impact on the Council's finances suggested a hit of around 4.5 million. And here, considerable thanks are owed to the finance team who've worked unrelentingly hard throughout the year, both to assess and understand the financial impact of the pandemic and to ensure we were able to recover our full entitlement from the government. And it has to be said that the government has been more generous than might have been expected in compensating local authorities. So what appeared at an early stage to be a substantial hit on our finances has been far less serious and remain in strong financial health. And our financial position does, though, contrast strongly with that of many councils. And so when many other councils are working to avoid Section 114 notices, we are in a position where we can contemplate extending the provision we've made for areas such as climate change and biodiversity into other key priorities such as housing, economy and well-being. This draft budget not only lays a solid foundation for our financial planning and management, but it is an investment budget, not a survival budget. And it gives us the ability to support and improve the communities within our district. And so I'm delighted to second the report and its recommendations. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Gould. Do we have any questions? Councillor Fleming.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you, Councillor Whitehead. I just have a question, really, on surrounding business rates. I see in our report on, I think it's on page, let's see, 129, that we're expecting to get almost 2.5 million in from business rates, if I'm reading that correctly. How confident are we in this, given the slightly tenuous state of a lot of our businesses in the district?
wants to come in on that one?
Well, I'll make a start, but I must admit, when it comes to business rates, I defer to Catherine's wonderful and extensive knowledge on the subject, and so I'd be happy to her to answer that on my behalf.
Thank you, Chair. The figures you're actually referring to on page 129 are the current year's figures for business rates, but at the moment we are projecting a very similar figure at the moment. That's one of the elements of next year's budgets we do need to finalise. It is an ongoing issue in terms of business rates and business rates collection. As we know, nationally, a number of businesses have folded. Some within our district have folded as well. The figure that we include in our budget is the proportion of the total rates that we collect that we're deemed to need from the business rates. So we actually collect, I think it's somewhere in the region of over £15 million in total from mid-Suffolk businesses. But what we include in our own budget is the government's assessed proportion that we can keep to run our services. I say it is a challenge with business rates collection at the moment, but what we do hold within the council, one of your reserves is called a business rates equalisation reserve, and we use that to try and smooth any peaks and troughs in terms of business rates. So if we find we have any issues in say 21-22, then we'll be able to call on that reserve to fund the losses, and then that will hopefully see us through the hard year, and then hopefully things will pick up in the economy again in future years. So I think the assurance is that you have that reserve to be able to fund anything that we have.
Okay, thank you. That's good to know, because that is obviously an element of uncertainty going forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is there any more questions from Cabinet members? No? Councillor Field.
To continue with that point on business rates for a moment, could one ask what sort of portion of our business rates income is from, say, the hospitality businesses of the type that we might expect to see severely hit, and what portion from manufacturing industry, or whatever you'd like to call industries that we don't expect to be hit?
Catherine, are you able to answer that?
I was going to say, would you like me? I'll try and do just a little bit off the top of my head, because I haven't got the breakdown of the business rates base in front of me. But I know the retail, hospitality, leisure sector this year, they received 100% business rates relief this year. And I believe for mid-Suffolk, that was somewhere in the region of £4 to £5 million in total. Now, if your total business rates base is round about the 15-16 million pounds, then we're looking at roughly a quarter of the base from that particular sector. I'm afraid I don't know particularly what the manufacturing sector is, but I know some of the bigger ratepayers, certainly in mid-Suffolk, are from the manufacturing sector. Sort of from that type, but I haven't got that particular breakdown. But hopefully that just gives you a rough idea of the proportion of the retail sector that's been getting the relief this year.
Thank you. Would that include people like, I believe companies like Tesco have decided not to accept that rate relief, or certainly some of the reliefs? Would that, your maths then have included them?
It would have done, because I think it's a very recent announcement that they've decided not to take that relief. I think I heard about it literally just before Christmas. I think there was an announcement that some of the bigger retailers, perhaps Tesco's and one or two of the others, had decided not to take that relief. But yes, they would have been in those numbers that I quoted.
Okay, so of your 25%, there's a fair percentage that perhaps would not be too challenged. Thank you for that. Could I ask one more thing? I noticed, I was just looking, it's actually a full 416. You talk about CPI inflation falling, and you talk about 0.8% in 2020. But I notice a number of the elements of the budget include figures like 2.3% inflation. I was just wondering whether you feel you're adequately taking account the fact that inflation is likely to be low due to the damaged economy next year.
Councillor Whitehead.
Yeah, I mean, I certainly, you know, when I was reading through, noticed that one or two of these inflations on projects, etc., were sort of quite in excess of the CPI, but I did question that. But if Catherine wants to sort of address any particular major items there, I certainly believe we are well covered, although I do have some fears for inflation in the longer term, just because of the way government borrowing has just gone skyrocketed.
Sure.
Thank you.
I was going to say, thank you, Chair. Just in terms of some of our contracts, some of those have got different factors built into them, so it's not necessarily linked to CPI. So what we've tried to allow for in the budget are where we know there are different indicators that drive the contract costs in future years. So say there are a range of different factors, but yeah, bearing in mind that overall inflation rates are currently quite low at the moment.
Thank you very much. So I'm now going to open up the item for debate. Again, if you can use the hands up function if you would like to join in. Councillor Richardson.
Thank you very much, Chair. There's just a couple of points I want to make, really. I think the first is just to reiterate what Councillor Gould said in seconding the recommendation in the report, that actually I think we should reflect on how fortunate we are to be in this position, to have had an extremely difficult year, and yet still to be in a position where we can continue to invest in our local communities. I think that's quite an enviable position to be in, and I think in many respects that reflects the fact that sound and careful management of our finances is something that Mid-Suffolk has been a hallmark of Mid-Suffolk District Council and its administrations for several years. But obviously that in itself, while that's to be welcomed, I think that's not an end in and of itself. We don't just look after the money for its own sake. I think what that enables us to do is go further and do more to support our communities, which I think is why Councillor Gould is absolutely right, that linking this in, linking our budgets in with our wider vision is absolutely right in places like housing, the economy, in well-being. I think when we looked to set our vision back in 2019, I think we were absolutely right then to place that emphasis on healthy communities. And I think what's happened over the last 12 months has, in many respects, just reiterated the need to do exactly that. Because obviously I know that our local businesses, our residents have faced a challenge of an unprecedented scale over the last 12 months and will continue to do so. But I quite passionately believe that the well-being of our residents and our businesses and our well-being strategy, a proactive well-being strategy, will absolutely underpin the economic recovery that we will see over the next few months. So I think that's absolutely vital. So I welcome the inclusion of those aspects in the budget. So I'm absolutely happy to support this, even though it is obviously only in initial draft form. I think this is absolutely setting the right tone. So I shall definitely be supporting it. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Richardson. So I will now ask the Governance Officer to conduct the electronic vote.
Thank you, Chair. Councillors, the vote is now ready for you in your ModGov app. Thank you, Chair. That's 9 votes for. That's unanimous.
Thank you very much indeed. Item 12 is MCA/20/20 and is the draft housing revenue account budget for 2021 to 22 and also the 4-year outlook. And I'm now going to invite the Cabinet Member for Finance to introduce this report.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm just sort of rearranging my desktop so that I've got my speech in front of me. as opposed to all the other ones. Yes, the third report this afternoon I'd like to introduce is Cabinet Report MCA 2020, the Draft Housing Revenue Account, Budget and 4-Year Outlook, which starts on page 149 of our pack. As with the general fund budget, this HRA budget is labelled draft at this stage and will be coming back to February's Cabinet meeting for further consideration before being presented for approval at full council later this month. And I'm also looking forward to taking that along with general fund to overview and scrutiny later in January. For the year 2021-22, we are forecasting a surplus on the HRA of £116,000. This contrasts with the large deficit forecast for 2021 of 564,000, but members will recall that that was primarily due to a slippage in our capital programme that we can now forecast an outturn surplus for 2021. Hope you follow that. The table in paragraph 5.2 compares the budgets for the 2 years with explanations behind the various line movements, and that's set out in detail in paragraph 5.5. Savings and efficiencies have been identified during a robust budget setting process. I won't go through those now, as they are there for members to peruse at their leisure within the report. But I would like to talk a little bit about our council house rents. In April 20, we increased our council house rents by 2.7%, being the consumer price index at the time plus an additional 1%. This was our first increase after 4 years of a centrally government-imposed reduction of rents by 1% each year. For the coming year, from 1st of April 2021, an increase based on September 20 CPI plus 1% works out to be only 1.5%. The net effect of these decreases, then increases over the 6-year period, is that for our average council house weekly rent in March 2022 will be only 11 pence higher than it was in March 2016. In other words, virtually unchanged. We will not be changing our sheltered housing utility charges in 21-22. There is an element of subsidy presently built into these charges, but we have seen some reduction in the price of gas, electricity, and especially oil. We can therefore freeze these utility prices for 21-22 while still making some reduction in the level of subsidy. Members will recall that we did not increase sheltered housing service charges in this current year. There remains an element of subsidy within these charges, and to eliminate this subsidy in 21-22, we would need to increase service charges by £2.90. We are not proposing to make such an increase, and the recommendation is an increase of just £1 per week. Now, I would hope that we can find cross-party support for such a modest increase, particularly as it follows on from 2 years of zero increase. Members should also note, as mentioned within paragraph 5.5, that we intend to develop a rent and service charge policy for our sheltered housing during 2021, with a view to bringing it into effect for the following year. Turning to capital, members will see we have an ambitious capital programme for the 4 years from 2021 to 2025. Working within CENI, the council has identified development sites for 254 affordable homes and 119 shared ownership homes. New builds and acquisitions are forecast to cost £42.2 million, and our housing maintenance programme £15.8 million. Appendix A on page 159 shows how we intend to finance this capital programme. And finally, I'd like to draw members' attention to what I think is one of the most important paragraphs in the report. That's paragraph 4.2. This explains how we will be reviewing our 30-year HRA business plan to incorporate new build specifications, the design guide, environmental retrofit improvements, and new safety enhancements. And this new business plan, which will be articulating our vision for council housing, should be coming to Cabinet this summer. I'd like to move the recommendations set out in paragraph 3 and would ask Councillor Haddingham, as the Cabinet Member for Housing, to kindly second them. Thank you very much.
Councillor Haddingham.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. As the portfolio holder for housing, I would like to thank my fellow portfolio holder for finance for his introduction to the HRA budget for the year 2021 to 2022. The income that HRA receives is invaluable in supporting our tenants to ensure their homes are safe, decent, and places tenants are proud to call home. The work of our team supports tenants to manage and maintain their tenancies while supporting them to succeed and thrive. It is evident from the report that the service is continuing to build on a solid foundation whilst maintaining services throughout the coronavirus pandemic. This year, within the housing service, development has included new software to improve services, the development of data sources to manage and increase performance, while developing services such as the Neighbourhood and Estates team and the expansion of our tenant engagement service. I second this report and the recommendations set out as within paragraph 3. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Haddingham. Any questions, anybody? Councillor Field.
Thank you. I didn't expect you to be quite that quick. I'll search for my question. Really, obviously there's we should discuss this largely at scrutiny, so I won't take a lot of your time. But I noticed the statements about the CPI plus 1% increase and that's impact on council house rents. And while it's a low figure, clearly these are vulnerable people. The real issue I was going to ask is the last time we were increasing rents in this way, telling ourselves that they largely came out of housing benefits, so weren't a problem. The government retaliated by forcing us to reduce rents by 1% a year for 4 years. Really, question is, how are you assessing the probability that you'll get that reaction again?
Councillor Whitehead.
Sorry, I followed you all the way through to the very end, but I wasn't quite sure what the reaction you were referring to.
A government reaction which forces you to reduce rents yet again. I mean, so clearly the impact on tenants is small, but in the wrong direction, but nevertheless small. But the last time the government reacted to us and presumably a vast number of other councils increasing their housing benefit bill by telling us to put it back down again, and that was the issue that I wondered what your assessment was.
I think I'm going to bring in Gavin Fisk on this one.
Well, can I just sort of say that I was trying to cover that, I think, in my introductory speech, insofar as we're saying over the 6 years, an average rent will be £84.58 next year was actually £84.47 if you do all the maths, working the percentages ups and downs back to 6 years ago. I suspect there isn't one 6 year period in the history of council housing when the rents only went up by that amount over a 6 year period. But I'd be happy. So I was surely the government would take that into account when looking forward. But I'm happy for Gavin to add his thoughts to that.
Gavin. You've just gone on to mute, Gavin.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Councillor Field and Councillor Whitehead. I mean, no one can clearly second guess future government policy. That would be slightly crass. The reality is that we've obviously faced, as a landlord and as social landlords have, a reduction in rents. That has obviously been of benefit to tenants, but that has meant that we've probably been able to be less ambitious in terms of our approach to new build and to the improvements to existing homes. What we do have, and the only certainty and security we can look to, is current rent policy, and that rent policy permits an increase as set out in the report. I think for housing providers per se, they need a level of security around rental income in order to deliver the huge number of new social homes that are required to meet needs, in addition to future spend on environmental improvements. So no one can second guess what the government might do, but they will at least give us direction through rent policy at least sort of 5 years in advance of any decisions.
Thank you very much. Councillor Wellham.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, well, I need to respond to Councillor Whitehead's prompt regarding sheltered housing charges. Is it not the case that the service charges are increasing because the number of units is reducing? Because some of the overhead costs are the same no matter what the number of units there are. And so as the number of units reduces, so the cost per unit increases.
Councillor Whitehead.
The whole service charge area is one that I know that our officers are looking at. For example, in Baber, I think they've got 13 sheltered units, and there are 12 different sheltered charging regimes in that within that figure, whereas our 14 units all have the same charge a week, which I think from memory is £30.83. But I know that there is a lot of work going to be done over the next 6 months. We had quite a conversation, Lavinia and I, with Lee Crodell on this, and we're looking forward to him bringing that forward. And from my perspective, I would think some cross-party involvement in that would be welcome, just because it just seems to be a political potato at the moment. And I think that my own personal view is it shouldn't be that way.
Thank you. Gavin.
Thank you, Chair. I think just to add to Councillor Whitehead, we're not seeing a reduction in the number of units. I think the process of de-designating or de-establishing sheltered housing schemes were decisions that were made some time ago historically, and I think a lot of that work is now complete. I think the work that Councillor Whitehead touches on, which is planned for 21-22, is looking at the service charge budgets and looking at the pooling or de-pooling that perhaps needs to take place to ensure that the service charges are fair and equitable to all. Clearly, where we have had additional expenditure this year or over the last couple of years is around obviously building safety improvements, and I don't think anyone would question those, but particularly on the back of the Grenfell tragedy, we've certainly invested far more in fire security, fire prevention and fire investigation in terms of the yearly checks that we carry out, and that will inevitably mean that we're conducting more work, as such as removing asbestos and all of those other component parts that we've been looking at. But yes, the work that we'll do this year will bring forward a proposal on the charging in the future.
Thank you very much. Councillor Field.
I was just going to make the point that I'm sure Green and Lib Dem group would welcome any cross-party involvement in setting policies. I tend to agree that this shouldn't be an area where political considerations are in any way dominant, so I'll be happy to see that happen. And there's some illustrations. I think, as I say, we'll look at most of this budget during scrutiny, but I noticed, for instance, that if one compares the spend on environmental improvements to our housing stock in general, it's quite a low figure compared with some other expenditures like the one that Gavin just mentioned on fire safety, etc. So there certainly are areas there which I think discussion could be valuable to, hopefully, to all concerned.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Field. We welcome your work working with us on this. No more debate. So I'm now going to ask the Governance Officer to conduct the electronic vote. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Once again, members, the vote is now in progress in your ModGov app. Thank you, Chair. That's 9 votes for, so that's unanimous.
Lovely. Thank you very much indeed. Moving on to item 13. This is MCA/20/23 and is the proposed John Peel Centre expansion. The report is in two parts. Part 1 is the public part of the report, and part 2 is confidential, which covers the appendices A, C and D. So I'll now invite the Cabinet Member for Economic Growth to introduce this report. Thank you, Councillor Brewster. Councillor Brewster.
I'm sorry. Thank you, Madam Chair. I am delighted to introduce this item, which recommends to Cabinet the proposal to grant a new 40-year lease on the former NatWest Bank building at 11 Marketplace, Stowmarket, to the John Peel Centre. The Council commissioned a report earlier this year in partnership with the John Peel Centre, which reviewed opportunities for the sustainable growth of this key structural anchor in the town and its positive impact on the wider town centre and generation as part of the Stowmarket vision. The position of 11 Marketplace building offers a front door to the JPC, enabling the organisation to expand their operation and provide a significant heritage and cultural tourism boost for the town, as well as the wider area of Mid-Suffolk. As well as improving the confidence and marketability of the JPC through a more visible high street entrance, proposed works within the building will also enable the JPC to offer a broader spectrum of events and activities through both reorganised and increased floor space options, also a green room capacity. The successful growth and cultural development of the John Peel Centre will enable the ambition for Stowmarket to flourish as a centre of excellence for creative, cultural, technological and innovative support opportunities, enabling a high quality of life, a vibrant town centre and a benefit for all in the community of the town and the wider district. This outcome is underpinned by a cross-cutting programme of project delivery and intervention that builds on existing advantages and develops national and regional attractions such as the National Museum of Food and the John Peel Centre. And one might add the Regals to that as well. This is an example of how we're investing in the future regeneration of our towns. By giving people a new and exciting place to visit, we can increase visitor numbers to the town, which will provide an economic boost as well. It is one of a number of exciting developments set to help the town's post-COVID recovery, which includes the new look Regal Theatre, benefiting from 3.6 million of investment for a comprehensive expansion and refurbishment programme. As Cabinet Member for Economy, I am committed to investing in the growth of this cultural asset for the town. Therefore, I am asking Cabinet to approve the following recommendations, which will support the objectives of the Stowmarket vision, properly monitor the Council's investment in the John Peel Centre, and ensure funding is secured for works to improve that building. These recommendations are, note the key recommendations of the consultant report, approve the grant of a lease on 11 Marketplace to the John Peel Centre, which will be conditional on the JPC providing a formal business plan acceptable to Mid-Suffolk Council, the provision of an acceptable funding strategy for the refurbishment of the building in 2 phases, making the necessary governance improvements proposed by the report, delegate authority to the Assistant Director Economic Development and Regeneration in consultation with the portfolio holder for economy, and I would like to add to the recommendation and the portfolio holder for assets and investment to finalise the terms and legal agreements for a long-term lease for the building, which is suggested for a 40-year period at a token rent, and approve the draft proposed KPIs which will be inserted into the lease and which, for members' information, can be found on page 398 of the paper. Madam Chair, I propose this recommendation to be accepted and look for a seconder.
Thank you, Councillor Brewster. Councillor Flatman.
Thank you, Chair. I'm absolutely delighted to second the recommendation and look forward to the John Peel Centre occupying the whole of the building and utilise the front entrance as their shop window. The opportunities for a cultural centre at the heart of the town are endless, bringing yet more tourism and spend into Stowe Market and the wider district. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Flatman. And do you accept Councillor Brewster's proposal to include the portfolio holder for assets and investments?
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Does anybody have any questions? No? Does anybody wish to debate? Councillor Gould.
Thank you very much, Madam Chairman. As Councillor Brewster said, the use of this site by the John Peel Centre will help support the growth of the cultural and arts venue, bringing more visitors to the town centre and giving the centre more prominence in the town. I just wanted to make the simple but important point that the value of the John Peel Centre within Stowe Market exceeds any commercial rent that could be achieved for the building, and that's the way I think we need to assess it. This is a great development. I fully support it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gould. Councillor Whitehead.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Just to echo really Councillor Gould's comments, I mean, we bought this several years ago for quite a modest amount of money, and the fact is we're not giving it away. Although we're giving it on a peppercorn rent, we are retaining the freehold, so that asset is there, will be there in 40 years, 50 years, 60 years time. But I think it really underlines to me just how exciting things are getting in Stowe Market. Now, where I live and residents around me, the gravitational pull of Ipswich is very strong, whether it's leisure or entertainment. But the fact that we now can see Stowe Market sort of blooming, whether it's the Regal or the John Peel Centre, and this wonderful vision that Miss Suffolk has for Stowe Market is great. And so I'm very, very strongly in favour of this development here. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Whitehead. I think if there's no more questions and there's no more debate hands up, I'm now going to ask the Governance Officer to conduct the vote.
Thank you, Chair. Members, the vote is now in progress in your ModGov app. Thank you. That's 9 votes for, Chair. That's unanimous.
Thank you very much indeed. So item 16 on the agenda is confidential. So we're now going to go to the resolution to exclude the public, which term includes the press, to consider whether, pursuant to Part 1 of Schedule 12A of the Local Government Act 1972, the public should be excluded from the meeting for the business specified below on the grounds that if the public were present during this item, it is likely that there would be disclosure to them of exempt information as indicated against this item. The author of the report proposed to be considered in Part 2 of the agenda is satisfied that the public interest in maintaining exemption outweighs the public interest in disclosing the information. Do I have a proposer?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm very pleased to be able to propose this exclusion of the public.
Thank you, Councillor Brewster. Councillor Flatman, are you seconding?
Yes, Chair, I'm happy to second the proposal to go to closed debate.
Okay. Lovely. Thank you very much, Councillor Flatman. I'll now ask the Governance Officer to conduct the electronic vote.
Thank you, Chair. Members, the vote is now in progress. Thank you, Chair. That's 9 votes for.
Lovely. Thank you very much. So the confidential item 16 is MCA/20/24 and is the disabled facilities grants.
Sorry, Chair. Can I just confirm with Rob that the live stream is stopped?